Hello, my name is Samuel Sharp and welcome to my presentation on the 2022 Qatar World Cup, exploring the sustainability, human rights, corruption, stadium design factors and overall legacy of the tournament. The FIFA World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world, attracting the most broadcasting views and media attention, followed closely by the Olympic Games, and is characterised by weather and billings as a mega sporting event. Sporting events like this are highly attractive to host for countries due to the increased government investment in different areas and high levels of tourism and attention gained both before, during and after the event. However, due to their size and influence, it is very important that they are sustainable in order to leave a positive, lasting legacy within the host country and the wider football community. The latest instalment was held in Qatar in late 2022 after they won a bidding process back in 2008. The organisation of Focus, the International Football Federation Association, otherwise known as FIFA, is the global governing body for all football activities. They establish all of the rules of the game and implement new initiatives to promote the global development of football through globalisation, which according to Beck is the spread of something to the rest of the world that once had local roots or origins. FIFA has become one of the most high-profile businesses on the planet, mostly for reasons of controversy, which we'll discuss later. Below is the structure of FIFA split through the continents, so governing bodies such as UEFA, and then into the individual nations, so governing bodies such as the FA. Although Qatar, being the first Middle Eastern country to host a World Cup, is widely seen as a good thing for globalisation, a very wealthy but tiny desert state being awarded such a major event over the likes of the USA and England, despite no football culture and a lack of suitable infrastructure and stadiums at the time, no track record of hosting any significant sporting events, came as a shock to many, especially with it needing to be held in the winter for the first time due to the heat in the country. Russia also won the 2018 edition on the same day, adding to the controversy. With Qatar blessed with the third largest reserves of natural gas, questions started to be asked. The global development of football goal from FIFA could explain why a non-Western country was backed and selected for the first time, but Blake and Calvert believe that Qatar used bribes to pay significant amounts of money to FIFA and government officials in exchange for favourable recommendations and votes. The evidence submitted led to an official investigation led by US Attorney Michael Garcia, who published a report that FIFA initially resisted to release. The report found no hard evidence of corruption by Qatar, which put an immediate end to calls for a revote for the event. The report did highlight foul play from Qatar, though, who definitely pushed the rules as far as they could be pushed. The investigation did actually lead to indictments and arrests of leading FIFA officials. However, this regarded the 2018 edition of the World Cup in Russia, suggesting that corruption certainly was rife within the organisation. The public perception of FIFA was at an all-time low. Whilst there was no formal evidence for corruption, the biggest controversy surrounding the World Cup in Qatar was around human rights. Qatar operated under something called the kafala system, an exploitative system which required workers to gain a sponsor in order to attain a visa and work in Qatar. This could be taken away at any time and workers would be instantly deported, heavily affecting workers' rights. The system was equated to modern-day slavery by several academics. Besides the kafala system, illegal working conditions, labour law and human rights provisions were frequently reported regarding the situation in Qatar, even resulting in worker deaths. Qatar has a minuscule native population and thus a minuscule labour workforce, meaning that they rely on migrant workers to complete significant developments. This workforce grew 39% during preparations and totals 75% of the population in the country. Unfortunately, this heavy reliance on migrant labour resulted in a reported figure of 6,500 migrant worker deaths, overshadowing Qatar's World Cup story. The death figure has been disputed by many news outlets and Qatari sources. However, even Qatar conceded that there had been worker deaths during stadium construction, with an internal report revealing at least 34 confirmed deaths. And this was amongst other concerns such as illegal working conditions and laws and rights being breached. Companies began to refuse to work on the World Cup and there was a widespread backlash. National teams from FAs from Norway, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark and Belgium protested against the working conditions and human rights in Qatar during World Cup qualifying fixtures. These events have shown that FIFA stakeholders can make a contribution to efforts to improve the plight of migrant workers in Qatar and elsewhere. At least 30 of the reported migrant worker deaths were attributed to heat-related heart complications within healthy individuals, according to Pattinson et al. The climate in Qatar was a major concern, with the tournament even being moved from its usual summertime to December. Qatar had to be innovative to address this. Because of this, the 2022 World Cup was the first with a publicly accessible climate plan. At the time of winning the World Cup bid, Qatar had no suitable infrastructure or transport networks, meaning they had to build it all from scratch. Various sustainable stadiums and venues were built. 65% of the materials used for these were recycled from landfills or from older stadiums. Areas were constantly air conditioned to manage the heat using eco-friendly cooling techniques such as water misting. After the tournament finished, at least 4 stadiums were dismantled and either recycled or donated to other countries to help develop their sporting infrastructure. One stadium in particular, Stadium 974, was built using recycled shipping containers, and it was supposed to be converted into 30 small community venues or donated for future stadium use abroad, but the outcome of this stadium and some of the others is actually unclear and unspecified. Still, the Qatar World Cup remained relatively sustainable and environmentally friendly, and the next tournament, USA 2026, has already taken a step backwards before even happening, being projected to be the least environmentally friendly World Cup of all time. In Qatar, it's considered a capital offence to engage in acts of homosexuality. Any sexual acts outside of marriage and public affection is also illegal. There's no legal recognition of transgender or gay rights, and campaigning for these rights is also illegal. Engaging in these acts leads to a significant jail sentence, or worse in some cases, as the death penalty is legal in Qatar. This, of course, was a concern for fans, journalists, and anyone travelling to Qatar for the World Cup. To address this, Qatar sent out statements and campaigns welcoming all groups to the tournament, ensuring safety without addressing LGBTQ+ specifically. However, rainbow patterned objects remain banned from events, which was backed by FIFA, with many being turned away from fixtures and events during the competition. And engaging in sexual acts remained punishable. Women's football and representation in Qatari society was heavily promoted, with Qatar forming their first ever female national team. Formal opportunities for females to play sport are still increasing, however strict traditional social norms remain. Legacy was one of the key themes and areas of focus for Qatar for the World Cup, even appointing a Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy as a primary organisation body. The estimated cost of the World Cup was around $220 billion, 60 times higher than the 2010 edition in South Africa, according to Mustafa. For Qatar, this wasn't a concern, as the World Cup was a financial anomaly. What the country was really seeking was non-commercial and focused on wider economic and social benefits for the country. Qatar wanted to showcase its power and influence to the outside world, with this direct quote from Chadwick Qatar stating that the Qatari motives appear to be to raise the national profile and its soft power of acceptance and cultural influence for a future beyond reliance on its oil and gas exports. However, the benefit for football was unclear. Reich and Brannigan record that one of the biggest positives and lasting legacies from the tournament was that traditional Qatari laws were permanently relaxed to embrace Western culture, including some of the labour laws mentioned earlier. The abolition of the kafala system was presented by FIFA and Qatar as the main legacy of the tournament in an attempt to reduce human rights criticisms. The introduction of a Workers' Charter in 2013, Workers' Welfare Standard in 2014, and more recently Laws 17 and 18 in 2020 brought in new legislation that provided a non-discriminatory minimum wage. This was a first for a country in the region. Other laws ended the requirement for migrant workers to attain their employer's permission to change jobs. The Human Sustainability Strategy offered support around job searches and transitions to roles within associated sectors in Qatar and abroad. Tens of thousands of staff involved in the World Cup received hard and soft skills training in more than 5 different languages. Society in Qatar had significantly developed, with public transport, infrastructure, and new laws vastly improving life for both natives and tourists in the country. The World Cup also upgraded Qatar's status for potential future bids for other events due to the new stadia and infrastructure as part of their Qatar National Vision 2030 document. A study from Dunetal found that the World Cup did not actually improve public perception of Qatar. Unfavourable connotations with Qatar were heightened by the negative media attention that issues surrounding the World Cup received. There was also a chance that these negative associations spread to FIFA's brand. As previously mentioned, the reported migrant worker deaths have left a permanent stain on the legacy of the World Cup in Qatar. As part of the legacy objective, a lot of the $220 billion budget went to much-needed airports, city centres, hotels, roads and rail networks that were created for locals to enjoy long after the tournament ended. Qatar also inspired fellow Arab and Muslim countries to progress towards a more open and accepting approach. The World Cup saw an increase in sports participation for Qatari citizens. Female activity and inclusivity were also promoted and did increase. For a nation with one of the highest obesity rates in the world and a small population of around 3 million, this was imperative. It was expected that the event would create over $380 million in business opportunities for Qatari small and medium-sized enterprises. And whilst the tourism industry did spike, it should be acknowledged that at the time of recording this presentation, that the event only concluded around 16 months ago, meaning that it's difficult to forecast long-term benefits and figures at this point in time. As Perez Seoane states, sports sponsorship is a way in which athletes, clubs and competitions, football related or not, provide visibility to brands through not always invasive presence in advertising breaks, being present in stadiums, key moments of matches, on sporting jerseys, and in press conferences, amongst other locations, in return for financial investment and funding. This helped Qatar to finance construction. When it comes to globalisation, Qatar are aware of the potential clash between their commitments to FIFA and corporate partners on one hand, and their accountability to their citizens and society on the other. Through corporate sponsorship, a mutually beneficial situation is created between sponsor and sponsored, as the former not only finances the latter, but also wants to associate its values with those of the latter. There is a significant mutual benefit, not to mention the tax advantages. Due to the surrounding controversy, Sony withdrew from a major sponsorship deal with Qatar. However, Qatar was not the only exception when it came to controversial hosts for tournaments. Russia held the previous World Cup, and other events like the Olympics in China, Beijing 2008, had faced controversy too. FIFA's network of global partners become the largest sponsors for every World Cup. For Qatar, these 8 partners were Adidas, Coca-Cola, Visa, Wanda Group, Hyundai, Kia, Qatar Airways, and Qatar Energy, all pictured right. There were more localised sponsors such as Qatar National Bank and McDonald's. Sponsor brands that did maintain partnership had achieved high levels of visibility by linking themselves to the World Cup and suffered hardly any consequences for associating with the controversy. The 2022 World Cup was the most profitable in history for FIFA themselves. However, due to globalisation projects, it is highly unlikely that Qatar made a profitable return from the tournament. Not that that was what they were seeking in the first place. According to Hussey, a stakeholder is an individual such as an employee, customer, or citizen who's involved with an organisation or society and has a vested interest in decision making and activities of that organisation. The key stakeholders for the 2022 World Cup include FIFA, the nations competing in the tournament, the Qatari government, the local organising committee, Qatari citizens, worker and migrant communities, sponsors and corporate partners, international organisations involved with the competition, football spectators and fans, media and security agencies. Each stakeholder either holds influence or is affected by the decision making of FIFA. This is why FIFA and each main sponsor have all incorporated sustainability into their corporate social responsibility portfolios in order to align with the expectations of clients and partners. These environmental initiatives do not always reduce emissions, waste and pollution at events though. Policy and governance is a key component of a mega sporting event and helps to define the legacy of tournaments like the World Cup. FIFA's sustainability policy was the first of its kind. It included initiatives such as eco-friendly stadium designs, renewable energy usage, waste management strategies, and transport solutions to reduce carbon emissions. FIFA partnered with both local and international organisations to promote environmental awareness and conservation efforts. FIFA introduced policies to address labour rights and migrant worker welfare in Qatar amidst controversy. These policies focused on ensuring fair working conditions, combating exploitation, and promoting inclusivity and diversity within the workforce. FIFA collaborated with relevant stakeholders like the Qatari government organisations, international labour organisations, and national governing organisations to monitor and enforce these policies throughout the tournament preparations. In response to past corruption scandals and allegations, FIFA implemented stringent anti-corruption measures to safeguard the integrity of the World Cup. These policies include enhanced transparency in bidding processes for future tournaments, robust governance structures including a new president and senior figures, and mechanisms to detect and prevent corruptive practices. FIFA worked closely with law enforcement agencies, anti-corruption bodies, and independent monitors to uphold ethical standards and combat corruption at all phases and levels of event organisation. The Qatar National Vision 2030 was a government document established in 2008, which saw the nation become one of the most prolific in bidding and hosting sports events as a means of augmenting the country's image. Societal development goals such as improved infrastructure and legislation were incorporated into the document through the hosting of mega sports events. After failing to win an Olympic bid, hosting the Asian Cup in football and the World Athletics Championships amongst many other events, this all culminated with the 2022 World Cup. Despite these efforts, challenges persisted in the implementation and effectiveness of policies, particularly in the areas of human rights and labour rights. Issues such as migrant worker conditions, freedom of expression, and worker safety remain subject to mass scrutiny and criticism from international observers and advocacy groups. FIFA faced pressure to address these concerns proactively and transparently, demonstrating its commitment to upholding ethical standards and promoting social responsibility in sports governments. Moving forwards, FIFA must incorporate lessons learned from past experiences and ever-evolving global standards to continue to refine and strengthen its policies on sustainability, human rights and anti-corruption, some of which have already come into question ahead of the next World Cup in the USA. By engaging with stakeholders, fostering transparency and, more importantly, prioritising accountability, FIFA can ensure that future World Cup tournaments serve as models of responsible, inclusive and progressive sports governance, leaving a positive legacy for host countries and the global football community. Here are my recommendations for future policy structure and governance at FIFA. Enhanced stakeholder engagement. FIFA should prioritise meaningful engagement with a diverse range of stakeholders, including governments, national governing organisations, local communities and labour organisations. By incorporating input from these groups into policy development and decision-making processes, FIFA can ensure that its policies reflect the interests and concerns of all relevant stakeholders. Transparency and accountability. FIFA must uphold high standards of transparency and accountability in its governance practices. This includes ensuring transparent bidding processes in the future, disclosing financial transactions, and providing regular updates on policy implementation progress. By fostering transparency, FIFA can enhance trust and credibility amongst stakeholders and the public. Robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. FIFA should establish robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to assess the effectiveness of its policies in achieving desired outcomes. This includes regular audits, performance reviews, and impact assessments to identify areas for improvement and address emerging challenges promptly. Capacity building and training. FIFA should invest in capacity building and training programs for its staff member associations and relevant stakeholders to enhance their understanding of key policy issues and implementation strategies. By equipping individuals with the necessary knowledge and skills, FIFA can strengthen its capacity to effectively implement and enforce policies. Further collaboration with international organisations. FIFA should collaborate with international organisations such as the United Nations, International Labour Organization and the World Health Organization to leverage their expertise and resources in addressing complex policy issues. By partnering with organisations that align with their desired values, FIFA can benefit from specialised knowledge and access to the best practices in areas such as human rights, sustainability and public health. Continuous improvement and adaptations. Zhu and Ewan found that, despite increased attention and regulations towards corruption, the self-governance structure has proven insufficient in addressing the issues of corruption within the organisation of FIFA, suggesting that they should be regulated further through international law. They conclude by saying that the underlying legal issues presented by FIFA's corruption are likely universal among international sports organisations. FIFA should adopt a culture of continuous improvement and adaptation in its policy development and governance practices. This includes being responsive to feedback from stakeholders, staying aware of emerging trends and challenges, and proactively updating policies to reflect evolving global standards and best practices. By implementing these recommendations, FIFA can strengthen its policy structure and governance framework, ensuring that future World Cup tournaments uphold the highest standards of ethics, sustainability, and inclusivity. Through collaborative efforts and commitment to transparency and accountability, FIFA can fulfil its mission of using football as a force for positive social change and global solidarity. In conclusion, sport has been a focus of Qatar's rebranding dynamic through globalisation, culminating in the World Cup presenting an opportunity to enhance its external image and promote its culture. For Qatar, it meant an opportunity, or perhaps the opportunity, to achieve global recognition as a country and spread its culture and heritage, present itself as a tourist reference for businesses, and exhibit its degree of globalisation and modernisation, says Paris Seoane. However, humanitarian concerns surrounding Qatar's motives, culture, and reported human rights practices, combined with accusations of corruption during the event bidding process, have meant that the World Cup has suffered from global controversy and criticism. Stadium design played a large role in the sustainability of the event, with building material being mostly recycled and venues being donated after use. Cooling systems were also eco-friendly. With legacy being a key consideration from Qatar for the tournament, high reported figures of migrant worker deaths and other controversial instances have tainted the legacy of the World Cup. Improved infrastructure and transport, law changes, and increased sporting participation have left a positive impact and improved the quality of life of Qatari citizens. It also was highly profitable for FIFA and surrounding sponsors. However, it is suggested by Danatal that public perceptions of Qatar did not improve after the tournament. Further collaborations, evaluations, transparency, and improvements were recommended for FIFA for future World Cups. Overall, Due to the lack of transparency surrounding sustainability and other contemporary issues, the working conditions and ultimate deaths of migrant workers, the legacy of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar was more negative than positive, despite a number of positives. Here are the references that I used throughout the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.